Good evening. Calling the meeting of the Calvert County Police Accountability Board to order. It is now 6:30 on February 22nd, 2023. We do have a quorum, and to let you know that this meeting is being recorded. You have in front of you the agenda for this evening. We have the updates from the chair, the complaint report status, the old business and new business, and public comment. If you have, is there anything else you would like to add to the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve.
It has been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion on approval of the agenda. Motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Agenda has been approved. The next item is the update from the chair. Our last meeting was in December, and we talked about at that meeting the end of year report. We did present that to the Board of County Commissioners in January. We had a favorable response from the county commissioners. And we also have approval of the MOU between us and the state's attorney's office has been signed off. And also the bylaws have been signed off. So those things have been taken care of. Just to mention that the ACC has been up and running since October. I've got some stats I would share with you in a minute about the cases that we've been reviewing. We also meet with the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission periodically. We've met twice since the ACC training just to meet with the executive director, Wayne Silver, to actually get clarification on some things, and that has been very helpful. Just to also let you know that all of the jurisdictions have not been trained. The ACCs have not been trained. I think there's still about 4 or 5 left to be trained. Well, more than that left, but 4 or 5 that have not even scheduled the training. So we have been in operation since October with the ACC and the PAB, of course, since July. We have had 2 meetings with the sheriff's office, welcomed the new sheriff on board, and also looking forward to working with the sheriff to enhance policing in Calvert County. We also, and I'll introduce you to the chair of the ACC in a minute, but we have weekly planning meetings, the ACC and the PAB, and we also have bi-weekly legal and staff meetings. So we're trying to keep up to be current on everything that's going on here and also around the state. And you got to give kudos to Liz Drew also. Liz is the person that she's Miss Calvert County PAB-ACC point of contact, if you will. And they do call her, and we'll talk a little bit later about what our plans are in terms of being willing to help others to better understand and appreciate the whole process that's in place. So with that, the first slide we have, I want to give you just a quick update in terms of the complaints received and the complaints that we have reviewed and made decision on. Since July, we were put in place in July, and the first half of the year, July through December 31st, there have been 37 complaints received. And this year so far, there've only been, 3 now. I think Captain Parrott sent us one over yesterday. So we have 3 so far in 2023. Cases reviewed by the ACC so far, we have 30 cases reviewed by the ACC. Case cases resulted in administrative charges. 8 cases resulted in administrative charges, and that's one of the things that the ACC, they look to, after reviewing the cases, to determine whether there is administrative charge or not. This is a presentation of the same data I just discussed, but I want to show you, they point out the red line, and those were, as I mentioned, the ACC members were trained in October, and there were 22 cases that were received before that and were adjudicated. In other words, decisions already made on those cases. So what the chair and the ACC members decided was that we would look at all cases. For those that have already been adjudicated, we've looked at them, and we pretty much were in sync. The recommendations made were in sync with what we came up with. As you know, we do have a structured process where we do use a disciplinary matrix that has been approved here and is consistent across the state for the most part. Okay, the first item, we had talked last time about any questions so far? Going too fast, stop me. We had talked about, after we successfully put in place the Memorandum of Understanding with the State's Attorney's Office, we talked about putting in place a Memorandum of Understanding with the Sheriff's Office. We had 3 volunteers from this committee last time that were willing to serve on that committee to look at that, and that was Dawn Lister, Suzanne Benedict, and Leslie Parker. We'll also, John Norris facilitated putting that other MOU together, and of course John will also serve on that. Sheriff's Office representative, I don't know who will serve on that, but you give us a name or names of people you would want to serve on that committee. I don't know whether Captain Parrott, you would be the one to serve, or Colonel Payne.
I'm sure the assistant sheriff would want to have some input along with the sheriff.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they will have me sit on that committee as well. Maybe Lieutenant Bowen, just so we can have a little diversity there.
And I will also be sitting on that committee, probably ex officio, or just to make sure that we have that connection and we can move this forward. So what I would like to do now is to entertain a motion to create a committee to develop a draft MOU with the Sheriff's Office, if that's your desire.
Motion to create the committee.
Okay. Don has moved to create the committee to develop a draft MOU. Do we have a second?
A second.
Second. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And then we'll move forward with that committee. I think it will be very helpful. It'll clarify any questions that we may have. It'll ensure that we do have a process in place that's smooth as we interact and send cases and investigations and a whole bit, and we'll all be on the same page. I think it'll be very helpful. Thank you. Under new business, we have policy recommendations, and I just want to point out that part of our responsibility as the PAB is to look for opportunities for to enhance policing, if you will, in Calvert County. And Suzanne and I had a discussion at the last meeting in terms of how do we actually do that? How we are here as the PAB, and we make recommendations on policy changes, and it became clear once we had the ACC in place how that works, because they do review the cases and look for opportunities for improvement. So at this point, I want to introduce you to the two gentlemen in front of me. We have the chair of the Administrative Charging Committee, Scott Deacon. You guys, some of you may be seeing Scott for the first time, but we were the one that put Scott on there, so welcome, Scott. And we also have Captain Parrott with us from the professional standards.
Yes, sir, yep.
Okay, and I'll turn it over to you, Scott, to go over the recommendations based on the cases that we have reviewed.
First, I'd like to start off by saying thank you very much for the opportunity to serve on that committee, and I appreciate that. And just a little background is when we started, we waited till the new sheriff came into power to establish our, thank you. I should have done that to begin with, I guess. To establish a relationship. And we started with, because again, in light of the open meeting law, there's 5 of us, so you can't have 3 of us to talk about business, otherwise it's a meeting. So luckily, Mr. Perrin is the number 2 on the ACC, and he and I went and started with talking to the investigators. And we also had our trustee administrator with us to keep notes, and we wanted to find out, how do you run investigations, administrative investigations? And they were very open and upfront about that. We appreciated that, and we advocated that we would be open and upfront about all that we do. It's not personal. It's observation of somebody's behavior that's documented against the policy standards or procedure standards. In any case, we did come into possession of some cases that happened before, as well as Mr. Perrin pointed out, before we were trained. So we had the responsibility, we didn't have the authority. So once we had the authority, we felt compelled that we should go back and look at them to validate, because that's what the public would want. So we did. And in fact, we sent letters back out on ones that all we concurred with to people, and just explained that we are executing our responsibility. You had an independent body look at it, and as required by the law, and it was good. When Sheriff Cox came in, we met with his leadership team and with Captain Parrott's team, and again, established a relationship to include talking about community engagement, particularly with the sheriffs, because some of them are a little uncomfortable that they lost some things in the Bill of their Rights. And we won't talk about cases either tonight or there, but we certainly want to talk about the process. In any case, the whole process. And asked Sheriff Cox if he'd like to join us. And on the other side, we'll talk about community engagement a little later on, I know, but we fully intend to do that. So probably a lot more than you wanted to know, but let's talk about, when we got into the meat of it, we saw probably the vast majority of a majority of cases were about speeding. Somebody in the public observed a police car that was speeding. And when we took a look at the policy, and the policy in the sheriff's office is 1820, Part D, we found that the policy respect to priority 2 calls. Priority 1 calls, that's when you'll have red lights, red and blue lights and sirens going. Under that, the state Article 21-201 and the exceptions to 21-106, they allow them to do that under those conditions. Priority 2, the language in there was a little bit ambiguous in that there's certainly the cases that you'll go priority 2 certainly would require haste on the part of the officer. And we absolutely believe that that's true. But the language was not such that it would allow for that. So we talked about that. And so we would when we talked to the sheriff, so there's no mystery that we blindsided them. We did discuss that. And they are looking at it. So our first recommendation is that the PAB formally send a discussion point to the sheriff's office that the policy and procedures that implement that policy should be reviewed and revised as necessary to comply with state law and exceptions to speed limits. And wish you would take that under action. Okay. The second one, an occasion came up for us to look at the policy on strip searches. And the policy was, the issue was done correctly under the current policy, but we think it needs to be a little more definitive with respect to who approves the strip searches, where they're done, and by whom the strip searches could be done. And it's different than a body cavity search, by the way, so you have to have, there's a separate policy on those two things, so don't be confused about that. But we made a recommendation that you review and clarify with the CSO strip policy, which is 10501, and revise as appropriate. And the last one was dealt with HIPAA regulations, health regulations. And the very fact that officers, they are exempt to a certain degree on HIPAA, because when they get a call goes into 911, they get informed about somebody's medical condition. That's just the way life is, because they have to know what they're going into, and so does the ambulance. But after that, if they're going to do any other outreach or something else, you have to be careful of what you say to somebody, because it may or may not be covered under that. And we think they ought to have a little policy and some discussion and training about that. And similarly, HIPAA applies to certain buildings where people come into, particularly some folks that want to videotape what's going on in that building, and it's not authorized. So to protect the people in that building and their rights, they should take a look at that too. So we recommend that they look at those. I'll read it. While officers have the access to information that would fall under the HIPAA regulations, a policy and training are needed to clarify how this information related to situations are managed with an emphasis on privacy. Those are our 3 recommendations on policy.
Okay,
And are you going to cover Kalia?
I am.
Okay.
Well, we have the 3 recommendations as a result of the review of cases by the ACC. Any questions on any of the recommendations? We're asking we would take action to recommend concur with these recommendations and forward to the sheriff's office, so that they're already working on it. Captain Perry, I don't know whether you want to make a few comments about that or not.
Yes, sir. I believe Captain Payne and I'm sorry, Colonel Payne and the sheriff, we are working on the priority 2 response to make it a little more clear for the PAB, should you have a necessity to review those types of cases where our officers are involved in a complaint. Strip searches, we'll wait to get the feedback from the ACC through the PAB to see exactly what more we can do with our policy. Again, a lot of our policy that focuses on some of these things were predicated when we were CLIA accredited. So when we move down that road, if the sheriff, he sees fit to have CLIA again, there's only so much movement you can have on policies as far as when the CLIA directive, where we have to show proofs. When we write those policies, it's structured around their directives or their standards. So it's difficult sometimes to alter that. Some of those CLIA standards are optional, where you can opt in or out of showing proofs for. It's only a certain percentage generally. Majority of them, you have to show a proof for the particular standard. So HIPAA, Mr. Deacon was right. Law enforcement, to an extent, is exempt from HIPAA. We're not a medical facility. So we look to garner the feedback from the ACC on what direction they would like to see or recommend our policy in case we have another complaint involving that type of release of medical information.
I think that one is just a need for a policy because of some event that happened. I'm not going to mention it because it's relating to a certain complaint, but it'll be clear once you guys
Yes, sir.
see what we recommended.
Yep.
Any comments on any of these?
Yeah, I have a question about the speeding.
Yeah.
Under the transportation article 21201, is what I'm understanding, is there a distinction between an emergency vehicle
Yes, sir.
versus a non-emergency vehicle?
Yes, sir. So,
And so right now, under priority number 2,
yes, sir.
that vehicle is not classified as an emergency vehicle as it relates to speed, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So the transportation article allows the law enforcement, if they're acting in an emergency vehicle with a siren, specifically, and then your lights to supersede the traffic law. When you're not going in that capacity, the law says we can't supersede it. Even though we know in law enforcement, there are times where we have to use haste, as Mr. Deacon said, to get to a call. It just may not rise to the level of a priority one response. The issue that we have is if somebody calls in to complain that the officer was speeding, even though we may be able to articulate what they were doing in their law enforcement capacity, I think that's what Mr. Deacon has indicated, where we need to clean the policy up a little bit, because there are times where we have to do that. And I give you an example. If we have to pace a car, for example, I want to say that's even on the Maryland traffic citation. If we pace a car, we're trained to do that. And to do that, we have to get a pace. Our car has to be calibrated to make the stop. But it will require us, if a car in front of us is doing 70 miles an hour, for example, to be able to pace it. So do we. To be able to stop the car, cite the violator for a citation, or just write them a warning. But if somebody were to call to complain, it kind of leaves it, we're kind of in a trick bag then, I guess. So I don't know how we do the best we can with it, I guess.
Any comments? Any other comments on speeding?
Kev, aren't there also instances where you're approaching the scene of something where you'd not want to approach with, as an emergency vehicle with lights and siren?
Yes, sir. If just say, I use the example for a burglary in progress call. We want to cut the lights and siren off before we get to the call, because we don't want to, if there is a suspect in a house or a commercial establishment, we don't want to give them the ability to set up an ambush style attack on us if they're carrying a weapon. So yes, we would cut our lights and siren off, but still get there in a hastily manner to try to intercept if there is a burglary in progress. And again, it just puts us in a tough spot, because if somebody calls in to complain that, you know, that we're speeding, I guess it's putting us in a tough bind right at this particular moment. So I'm not quite sure what the answer is to that.
Sure. Is there any possibility that perhaps, I see that the policy will be reviewed for the department,
Yes, sir.
perhaps reaching out to legislation to change the state law as it relates to the transportation article 21?
We could do that, sir. We could lobby the legislators or the Maryland sheriffs and chiefs to maybe to look at that. And I want to think that probably with the new Police Accountability Act, the accountability boards and the charging committees throughout the state, I think it's going to trigger a lot of, and it already has triggered a lot of conversation for potential buttoning up of the legislation. Because Mr. Norris will tell you that the law is very ambiguous. It's not clearly delineated in a lot of things, and it kind of puts police officers in a bad spot when they're in the performance of law enforcement duty, if they get a complaint.
And we are working through those kinds. Go ahead, Scott.
Yes, we are. On the ACC, in our training, which was really very good training, we don't have the ability to supersede what the recommended punishments are if it violated the policy. I understand and I fully support and understand why that officer may have exceeded the speed limit or not gone in an emergency situation to a burglary. That makes perfect sense to me. I don't have the ability on the ACC to say, I'm going to give you a pass on that, because it's written very specifically in that law. I can't do that, or we can't do that. So the best we can do is come to you all to go to, we actually talked to the sheriffs too ahead of time, said, hey, just FYI. And I think that would be a point when we talk to the sheriff deputies themselves. Look, we don't want to, this is how this stuff works. And we want to help you not run afoul of doing the right thing for the right reason and suffer because of policy.
Thank you. Any other questions?
One last thing, we did address these things when we talked to the state level standards. Well, first I'll make a comment. They are very appreciative of Calvert County in particular on leading the charge. We're very fortunate we only have one department to deal with, but the county did an outstanding job on vetting people, setting this up, the computers that work on VPNs to protect the information, how we track the information, which really goes to the administrator's capabilities and competence. we really are leading the pack. And very frequently, Liz gets called from newly trained people because they say, go talk to Calvert County. They've got tools that they'll share with you and documents that they share with you, so.
I think, Mr. Hawkins, you received one of those calls.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, I did, from
Yeah.
Queen Anne's County.
I think one of the things there, though, is that because we were the first ones trained, we like to loop back to the trainers to see what changed since we received our training, and they give us an update on what they had to go back and correct their courses, trying to correct some of the things that Captain Perry, you talked about that's not clear. They would go back, they're correcting their courses going forward, but we want to also see what's they're corrected so we can benefit from that.
Right. It's our legislators now we're talking about, okay?
Yeah.
Sometimes I find it's difficult. From what we understand, we're not sure if this session there will be any changes to the current, other than I think the one committee piece that's been introduced in the committee, but I don't know that that'll make it out or not, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but they're not expecting a lot of, because I guess all the new legislators, maybe they have, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think there are two pieces of legislation right now, John, that they're looking at, but I'm not sure it's
Yeah.
in Annapolis, you don't know
Yeah,
yet,
no,
right?
you never know up there. Never
So
know.
we have the recommendation regarding regarding speeding, the sheriff's office policy and the procedures that implement the policy should be reviewed and revised as necessary to comply with state law and exceptions to speed limits. Do we have a motion to approve this recommendation?
I move to approve this recommendation.
Lisa moved. Any second?
Second.
Second, Leslie. Discussion on that first recommendation. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Second one related to strip searches. Recommend a review and clarification of the Sheriff's Office strip search policy 10501 and revise as appropriate. Discussion on any, I would entertain a motion on this recommendation so we can discuss it.
I'll make the motion.
Susan made a motion, second. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Discussion? What we do, I just want to add this, what we do when we get a policy where we have questions about, we tend to look at other policies, law enforcement around the state. And in this one particular, we did find a couple that, one that was not clear, and one that was pretty specific in terms of strip searches and cavity searches. So there are policies out there, and that particular law enforcement agency was clear, accredited. Scott, anything else you want to say on that, Mr. Deegan?
No, sir.
All right. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. The HIPAA. This is, looking at my notes, why our officers have access to information that could fall under the HIPAA regulations, that policy and training are needed to clarify how this information and related situations are managed and emphasize on privacy. Do we have a motion to approve this recommendation?
Motion to approve.
Thanks, Leslie. Do we have a second? I'll second. Second. Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Scott. The Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. It's called CALEA. We received a presentation earlier on, I think it was at our second meeting in September, regarding Kalia and the state, I know the Maryland State Police, they are Kalia accredited, and Calvert County Sheriff's Office was Kalia accredited at one time. And the recommendation here is that this is a recognized organization that work with law enforcement around the world, worldwide, and it adds a lot of value to the overall policing. And the recommendation here is that the Calvert County Sheriff's Office consider going through that process again for accreditation. And it's a 5-step process. I'm sure, Captain Perry, you're familiar with it. I guess you were around when it went through the first time.
Yes, sir.
I remember the excitement around that when, matter of fact, Colonel Hedgel, I guess it was, or Major Hedgel, came to the Board of County Commissioners and requested to go through that process and for funding and resources to do that. And the Sheriff's Office was successful in going through that process. They're not accredited at this time, but the recommendation here is that the PAB would support the Sheriff's Office going and getting that accreditation again. And it's an enrollment, a self-assessment, an assessment, commission review and decision, and maintaining compliance and reaccreditation. So that's the maintenance of compliance and accreditation. What I've read is that there is an audit process that you go through once you've gone through and received accreditation to ensure that you're still you can be reaccredited. So this is something that we would support. I think the PAB talked about this early on. So we're bringing it before the PAB now, that we would recommend support the Sheriff's Office in getting their accreditation through CALEA. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Motion, or a second? Second.
Absolutely.
Discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
A question. If you had it at one time, and I'm sure that you have all of that documentation still somewhere, wouldn't it be a matter of updating what you already have to submit again, or have things changed?
I think we could use those files and standards, and I believe, yes, the standards have changed somewhat, probably not all of them. I think the process may have, for release reaccreditation, may have changed a little bit too since we went through it the first time. But generally, for an agency that's fresh out of the gate, it takes about 3 years to get to the assessment part, the initial assessment part. And it took us a little longer than that because we had a little change in leadership in certain bureaus where kind of took a little back burner for a minute. But once we got situated to be reaccredited at the time, we'd have assessors come out from various parts of the country and assess your agency. They would pull your standards, they'd bring the standards, they'd pull your proofs, they would look through, not all of them, but they would look through particular ones they grabbed their hands on. Then we'd have an on-site of equipment there and things for them to look at and review. So it was quite the process, but I think that's changed a little bit. So no, I'm thinking that it probably, just my opinion, probably wouldn't take 3 years to get up and running. Now, I will tell you this, that it is very time consuming. Now, I know Charles County Sheriff's Office, for example, I believe they have an accreditation team where they have a couple individuals that maintain that project. So I want to say that the sheriff has spoken to Mr. Perrin about that. So with his support, which his support goes a long way, I'm sure that, hopefully that's the way that they want to go, we can make that happen.
I think it would be great to have our sheriff department accredited again. And because the 3 agencies work very closely here in Southern Maryland, Calvert County, Charles County, St. Mary's County. And from what I've read, Charles County is the leader of the pack. They are really elite as it relates to the accreditation process, or the accreditation of being accredited. And I would love to see our agency up there as well.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's expensive and it's time consuming, but I guess somebody can find the money from somewhere so that we can come back up with the other agencies since we work so closely together.
And there are resources we can use too as
Right.
we start that endeavor again. We can
Yes.
always, well, they're great partners for us, Charles and St. Mary's County, I think, but St. Mary's County is accredited as well.
Yeah.
But we call them frequently for, it could be policy, we have policy questions, or we want to write a new policy, or the accreditation, when we were going through it the first time, it was, we have a good partnership here in Southern Maryland.
And if you get the opportunity, I would encourage the sheriff to dedicate perhaps maybe 2 people as full-time accreditation folk, so that it's a process that's ongoing once you become accredited.
Yes, sir, I think we've spoken,
We did.
we've tried to get that point across, that it's, you really do, you have to have at least one person at minimum to be the accreditation manager.
Correct.
But I would definitely strongly encourage what you're saying, Mr. Hawkins, absolutely.
That's exciting to see that process rolling again, I tell you. I think Charles County was accredited, I think 2000, 2001, and they've been accredited
Yes.
for 21 years. So
Yes.
they were in the elite status in that program, so we
Once
wanna
you get
there.
Once you get through it, all the work you put into to getting there, when that
Yeah.
first on-site is, they're there to get your very first initial badge of, you pass, and then you go out to the conference, and
Mhm.
your award, they mention your agency. It is a big deal.
Mhm.
I mean, it's pretty prestigious for any leader, even the community, when the community knows that your agency is credited.
Decal on the car.
Yeah, get the decal, yeah, we had those on there, absolutely. Yeah, we had them on there.
So is the recertification process really involved, or, I mean, once you get it?
No, it's actually, it's a little easier, because, once you get the initial phase, your initial accreditation, once that's done, it's just basically the agency, you have to maintain the proofs for the standards. And I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, that I think that the on-sites for the reaccreds have changed a little bit. I don't necessarily know that you have to, that they'll send assessors out to your agency, because it's 2 or 3 days that they're here. We put them up in a hotel and, and feed them, and they're looking through your stuff. So that may have changed a little bit. I haven't been in the weeds with that in several years, so I'm not quite sure.
And Captain, how long again has it been since we've been accredited?
I want to say, I think it was, 2016 maybe, I think is when we ended, I want to say,
Yeah,
somewhere around there.
15, 16, somewhere
So
around
are we considered, when we go through this process, are we considered to be going through a reaccreditation process, or are we considered to be a new applicant?
I'm probably a new
there.
applicant.
That's a lot of years.
Because it's been some time, but the advantage we do have, depending on how much of the state, we still kept those files. So we can go back and just to see what the new standards are, to see what we had in the
I
past.
just wanted to ask that for clarity, because as you talked earlier, that process took about 3 years.
It did.
The last time around.
Yes,
so
sir.
We shouldn't necessarily be thinking that this is gonna happen.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen overnight. Now, what the hope is, if that's the way that Sheriff Cox wants to go, that, being accredited before and having that will expedite that, hopefully. It'll speed that process up, I'm hoping. But don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. I'll just hope.
I got your name in my notes.
Yes, sir.
I just want to review a few bullets about the CLEA as an organization. It's the premier law enforcement credentialing authority worldwide. Its accreditation process is a proven modern management model that improves the delivery of public safety services through its body of professional standards and worldwide. Helps agencies reach organizational goals by requiring a set of well-thought written directives and a well-developed system of internal reporting used to provide the sheriff, chief, or other executive with fact-based information upon which to make management decisions. Requires a preparedness program for a wide range of emergencies, encourage law enforcement agencies to meet the highest level of professionalism and excellence in service, and strengthens public confidence when our community knows it is protected by an agency that is part of an elite group of law enforcement professionals. So that's just a summary that about Kalia, and for more information, their website is calea.org. So we have to vote on that, right? We have the motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion to support the sheriff's office acquiring the accreditation, Kalia accreditation, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
We convey to the sheriff that we support him moving forward if that's his desire to move forward with that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, outreach plan. This is something that Mr. Deacon, Scott Deacon, and I are excited about. This is an opportunity for us to work with other PABs and ACCs around the state as they develop, they organize and develop. Because we have some lessons learned that they can benefit from. So we have communicated to the Police Training and Standards Commission that we are willing to come out and assist in any way, maybe by phone or however we have to help those other agencies, other boards and committees get up and running and work with them. We also would like to work with the law enforcement agencies. We've talked to Captain Parrott, we talked to the new sheriff in terms of coming out and talk to the deputies. There is some anxiety, and this is new to all of us. You had the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, which went away the end of June of 2022, and this is new. So there's some anxiety around that, and we want to go out there and explain exactly what this process is, the tools that we have to work with, and the standards by which we use to make a decision. That also applies to the public. There may be organizations out there that would be interested in us coming out and talking about the PAB, the ACC. We will not in any of these encounters talk about any specific case, but we'll talk about the organization, the process, and procedures that we go through. So we do have one request that we're working on. I don't think we've nailed down a date yet, but the League of Women Voters have come to us, and they would like at some point in the future to have us come out and talk about the police accountability. So Scott, you want to add something?
I do. I think how we're going to approach this is we are going to have a scripted briefing, which means quite literally it's read to folks, and so the same information is given to everybody. We also checked with John, Mr. Norris, to see if we could have all the members come. And because this is not, we're not going to discuss business, yes, all the members of the ACC, or PAB for that matter, could come. And I think it's important that, particularly I can speak for the ACC, that we do come out. You can see there is diversity in experience, because we all will talk about our experiences, I'm sure, what our backgrounds are, and experiences. And I'm very complimentary of the process for selection. I don't think you could have got a better leader than Mr. Perrin. And it's made things work very smoothly based on his experience and connections. And the group that at the ACC is it's phenomenal. You could not have done better. We don't always agree. It's always very professional, and we have open and frank conversations, and there's respect. And like I said, I'm very thankful for that. But I think if we go out and then you can address any of those individuals, they can stand on their own 2 feet. They're not afraid of confrontation, not a one of them. So in any case, that's it. So you might get an invitation if you'd like to come and be part of a presentation. Surely would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One other thing that I want to, any questions or comments on this outreach initiative?
One other thing that came up yesterday, we had a meeting yesterday, Scott and I, and John Norris, the county attorney, had a meeting with the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission. And he made us aware of the fact that we knew this, but when there is an appeal regarding a decision made by the ACC, the law enforcement officer can appeal to the trial board. We have a trial board in place. That trial board has been trained. We have a retired judge leading that board, a member appointed by us, the PAB, and there will be a member appointed by the law enforcement agency, a person of equal rank to the person that's making the appeal. So we do have a person ready to go into action on that trial board. We found out Wayne Silver pointed out yesterday that any case, any complaint against an officer that's, let's say, is a state police or a natural resource police officer from Calvert County, and that case is appealed, decision will be made by the ACC of the state, but the appeal will be handled by the trial board here in Calvert County. So he's saying that there are several cases that are ready to be distributed around the state. He recommended that we look at putting together, naming 2 to 3 additional members of the trial board as alternates. John suggested that we do it as alternate, just in case we do have 2 or 3 boards going on at the same time, or someone, our primary member may not be available to serve. The alternate can step in and serve, and we can keep that process moving. Because by the time it reaches the trial board, there may not be a lot of time left, and the clock stops at 1 year plus 1 day. So we will have to decide how we're going to advertise for members, anyone interested in serving on as a trial board alternate at this time. And I did get an email this afternoon from the state regarding training, and they have training set up for March 14th and 15th. It's a 2-day training for the trial board member, April 11th and 12th, and May 23rd and 24th. So if we can get it advertised and perhaps get the word out and start the process and get someone selected perhaps by the April time frame, we can get them into the training. The challenge with the training is we have a limited training staff at the state level, and they're trying to train as many people at one location as they can. So this training is at Sykesville. I know some of you know where the training center is at Sykesville. It would be a 2-day training, and the training will be held from 9 to 4 each day. So the next thing on our agenda will be to, we'll get with our HR support folks to advertise the positions on the trial board, and then once we get the names, we have to decide who we would select for that. Okay. Anything you want to add to that?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. With that, last time I mentioned that we would have a section on the agenda for comments from any members. So we'll start. If you have any comments you want to make before we go to public comment.
No, sir, no comments from me.
Okay. Suzanne? That's it? Wow. Don?
No comment.
No comment.
Wow. Okay. All right. If anything else that anyone wants to talk about before we go to public comment? All right. Then we're at a point on our agenda for public comment. And I want to read this before we get into public comment. While all views and perspectives are welcome during public comment, be aware that speakers are personally responsible for their own expressions and comments.
It is recommended that speakers refrain from commenting on unsettled claims or complaints and refrain from using names where possible. The PAB will accommodate public comment in person or by phone. Individuals who participate virtually should call or log in advance, and participants may call toll-free 888-475-4499 or 877-853-5257. Meeting ID 862-4036-9411. And if you ask for a passcode, is 194530. Speakers, whether in person or participating virtually, will be limited to 2 minutes as individuals or 5 minutes if the designated representative of an organization. So that's at the, this was at the bottom of the agenda that was published days ahead of time. So do we have anyone in the room for public comment? Mr. State's Attorney.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bob Harvey, State's Attorney. I just wanted to let you know that when I first got into this job, I was shocked to find out that our sheriff's office was no longer certified through CALEA. I just assumed that they were, because they had been, and because I thought that they operated as a very efficient and effective organization. So when I found that out, I was shocked. I want to commend the board for taking the position tonight to recommend that the sheriff seek that certification again. And I want the sheriff to know, through Captain Parrott, I fully support that effort as well. I think it's important that our local law enforcement agencies rise up to the highest level and standards across the country. It will help me do my job, it'll help them do our job, your job, and it'll help the sheriff's office do their job. So I fully support it, and I want to thank you for that action you've taken tonight.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else? Anyone online?
There are some folks online. Online, if you please use the raise your hand function or press *9 if you're calling in. We'll identify you for public comment.
You can have them state their name and where they're from.
No one has raised their hand yet. Does not appear, Mr. Chair, that there's anybody online that wishes to make comment.
Okay. There's no one else for public comment, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. That should be quick.
Second.
Been moved and second that this meeting is adjourned. We stand adjourned. Thank everyone for coming.
Thanks, I'll see you.
Have a-